Hi, if you think the big changes in renting, the Renters' Rights Act, only start on the 1st of May, this video may surprise you because some of the most important changes affecting landlords are already in place right now, because since the 27th of December, local councils have been given stronger responsibilities around housing enforcement. They've now got to report directly to the Secretary of State on how well they are improving housing standards. And that means enforcement activity is increasing today, not next year. And one of the biggest triggers for enforcement action is something very ordinary: repairs. So, as I said, it's already happening. Last week, we talked about council enforcement. For example, Fenland District Council issued over £600,000 in fines to landlords last year. And Birmingham City Council has announced plans to spend £710,000 employing additional enforcement officers. Why? Because councils now have the responsibility to demonstrate they improve housing conditions. So this isn't something landlords can ignore in the future. It's already here. So where do repairs fit into enforcement? Because most enforcement cases don't start with terrible housing. They start with really small repairs that weren't addressed quickly enough. Under Section 11 of the Housing Act, landlords, as you know, must maintain the structure of the property, the heating system, plumbing and water supply, gas and electrical installations, sanitation and drainage. These 5 duties have existed for decades, but where repairs are delayed, they can quickly fall under Housing Health and Safety Rating Systems, HHSRS, and that's where the councils can step in. So how do small problems turn into enforcement cases? The pattern that we've seen is usually very, very simple. A resident sends a message: "Hi, extractor fan in the bathroom has stopped working." Landlord replies: "I'll get someone to look at that." That's me on text. Life gets busy, a few days pass, then a week. Meanwhile, condensation builds up, mould starts appearing. And that's what started as a £120 repair suddenly becomes a health issue. And if your resident reports mould to the council, the situation can escalate quickly. So real examples we've seen. Recently, we took over several properties from another agent. And we found things like extractor fans that had stopped working, trickle vents that had been painted shut, windows that didn't open. Simple issues, but together they create poor ventilation and damp conditions. And if a council officer inspects, they won't ask whether the landlord meant well. They assess the property against HHSRS hazard standards. And documentation usually is where landlords get caught out. So it is really a major issue, because when councils investigate a complaint, they want to see evidence. They ask questions like: when was the issue reported? When did the landlord respond? When was the repair arranged? And when was the repair completed? And if there's no record, the assumption may be that nothing was done, or it hasn't been done in a timely fashion. And that's where landlords can get into trouble. So this is really why informal communication is really risky. We've found that many self-managing landlords rely on WhatsApp messages, text, quick phone calls. But when enforcement when you're looked at from an enforcement point of view, they are not reliable records, because messages can get deleted, phones change, conversations are forgotten. And when councils ask for evidence, you need a clear record of what happened and when. Without that, you've got very little protection. The financial risk is really bigger than many landlords realise. Fines under the housing legislation can reach up to £30,000 per breach. But there's another risk that landlords often overlook: rent repayment orders, because these allow tenants or councils to apply for repayment of the rent if certain housing offences occur. And under the new framework, the Renters' Rights Act, the rent repayment orders can now cover up to 24 months of rent. So let's put that into perspective. If the average rent is £1,200 a month, 2 years of rent, that's nearly 30 grand. So the financial impact can be very significant. So this is why repairs matter so much. Most enforcement cases begin with something really small. A repair that was delayed, a maintenance issue that wasn't documented, a hazard that wasn't recognised early. But once the council become involved, the situation becomes harder to control. But repairs also protect your investment. There's a commercial reason to deal with repairs quickly. Small issues rarely stay small. A loose tile becomes a leak becomes a ceiling damage, faulty extractor fans become mould, and mould complaints often trigger inspections. So maintenance isn't a cost, it's protection for your asset. There is some good news. Here's the reassuring part. If you're watching this, I expect you maintain your property and you deal with repairs quickly. So you've got nothing to worry about. It's documentation that worries. The rules themselves are not new. Section 11 obligations have existed for decades. HHSRS standards have been in place since 2004. What is changing is simply the level of enforcement. Good landlords should welcome that because it raises the standards across the sector. And a simple rule we've always followed. In more than 30 years as a landlord and over 20 years of running this business, Maxine Lester's, I've always used a very simple rule. Before renting a property, I ask myself, would I let my family live in the house? Now, all right, it depends on how I feel about my family at the time, but the principle is simple. If you would happily see someone you care about living there, you're probably on the right track. So, a final thought. The key message for today is enforcement is already increasing. Councils now report directly to the Secretary of State. More enforcement officers are being hired, and repair issues are one of the most common reasons landlords get caught out. But if you maintain your property properly, respond to repairs quickly with the right documentation, keep those proper records, you should have nothing to worry about. Why don't you subscribe to our YouTube channel, Maxine Lester TV, where each week we're breaking down what's up and coming for the Renters' Rights Act, so you can stay compliant and protect your investment, and also stay ahead of the changes. So sign up and I'll see you next week when we'll look at deposits, one of the most common areas where landlords accidentally create a legal risk. So one step at a time, professional, prepared and protected.